Welcome. Welcome to the first Developer AMA. I'm Mark Franks, your host, along with Eric Harris Braun and a panel of developers at Holochain to answer your questions. I'm super excited to be here. I'm relatively new hire as the head of developer relations, and this is kind of the first event that I've been planning and associated with. So I'm excited to be here and to shepherd this event along. So let me just go ahead in the agenda. So I want to just give you a little bit of information on the format. We'll introduce all the panelists here. Then we'll go right into the Q&A. We'll first go through the submitted and then the live questions. At the end, I have a slide on some developer resources that are useful. And then I always like to do a call to action. What are we asking you, our developer community? So the scope of this is really around developer questions. We're tabling non-developer questions. So please don't take it personally if you ask a question and we don't answer it. It's because it's not focused on what a developer particular topic that we want to cover. As I mentioned, we'll cover the pre-submitted questions first. I think we have around 18 or actually 20 questions that have been pre-submitted that we're answering, and then we'll move into the live questions. Now you'll notice hopefully on your screen, you should have, a chat bubble and a Q&A with two bubbles. Please ask your questions in the Q&A, not the chat. We have Nathan here who will hopefully remind you if you happen to accidentally, well, not accidentally, but you post your question in the chat, he'll ask you to repost in the Q&A so we can go through those and they become visible and we can get to things that we don't get to later on. So just a little bit of housekeeping there. We are recording. We'll do a little post-production on the video recording, and then we'll share it with all of you, anyone that registered. We'll also post it to the Holochain.org website as well. All right, so now it's time to meet your AMA developer panelists. Matthew. Oops, sorry. Is Matthew here?
Yep, here I am.
Yep, Matthew, why don't you introduce yourself?
All right, I'm Matthew Brisebois, a developer for Holochain, and I've been spending most of my time doing app development, specifically App Store and Dev Hub for Launcher. And in the process, I have done a lot of validation logic, had to figure out CRUD patterns, and try to make reusable zones.
Great. Matthias, you're up next.
Yep, hello. Yeah, I've also worked mostly on apps and also on admin UIs. So that's, for example, the Holochain launcher I'm currently working on, which is basically an app that manages the conductor, so manages for end users to install apps, more than one Holochain apps and run them. That's.
Gregory?
Hey, so I'm core team developer, so I work on Holochain itself. I've been working with Holochain for about 5 months, so still fairly new. And my focus has been on the backlog of community requests and bug reports. So I work all over, and I'm now balancing that with a bit of QA as well, working on testing Holochain directly.
Great, thanks, Gregory. Joost.
Yes, hi. I also am on the Holochain core team. Yeah, I work mainly, my work revolves around the conductor API, so I know that best at Holochain, and also the interface to it, the client side. I look after the JavaScript and the Rust clients for Holochain, and also focus on testing Holochain, app testing, distributed tests, and the related toolset Trirama.
David?
Yeah, so I'm core dev. I've written and designed a bunch of the core things. Wrote the HTK, WASM implementation, validation, the other callbacks. Done that. And a lot of the real-time stuff from the perspective of the conductor. So like remote calls, scheduling, and the access control that goes with that. So cap grants and things like that. Yeah.
Great. Michael, is Michael here? I think Michael is not here, so I'm going to skip Michael. Josh?
Hi everyone. I'm fairly early in my journey as a Holochain app developer, but I do have good experience with blockchain. So I've been exploring how Holochain and blockchains can work together.
Thanks, Josh. Eric, also known as Zip.
I'm one of the co-founders of Holochain, but in this context, I get to write lots and lots of apps, and so I'm usually the person who finds the first bug. And I'm a big pain in the side of all the Holochain core developers. Is I'm like, why doesn't this work? Which means you can ask me about why things don't work. You can ask me about app development and architecture in general, and pretty much anything Holochain.
Great, thanks, Eric. Lisa.
Hi, my name is Lisa. I'm one of the developers on the Holo team. I've worked on both the central and the distributed side of Holo, and I've spent a fair amount of time actually developing and writing the applications on Holochain that will serve the infrastructure purpose for Holo. These include Holo hosting application and service logger. And most recently, I've been working actually on the hot reserve development. So how you can purchase Holo fuel or how you can redeem Holo fuel back into the hot token. And yeah, so any questions about the reserve, any questions about writing applications on Holochain, or questions about Holo itself, one of the 3 developers from Holo here, that'd be happy to answer those questions specifically for Holo too. So, and I'm sorry if this background noise, I'm actually at the Toronto conference, so if there's a little bit of background noise, that's why. So just throwing it out there. All right,
Thanks,
happy
Lisa.
to be here.
As we start to get more,
So I'm going to go back to Michael, just joined us. So Michael, why don't you introduce yourself quickly?
Sure, I'm Michael. My router just went down, so I'm on my phone. I'm a Holochain core developer. Currently really focused on our sort of testing effort to really up our testing abilities to really add a new level of reliability and find weird edge cases and stuff like that. Most recently been working on the networking gossip protocol and had my hand in kind of a lot of work.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Sorry about your router. Joel, you with us?
Yes. Hey, I'm Joel. I am a Holo developer, primarily focused on Holo's architecture. I built a bunch of apps, and one of the apps I've worked on is Holo Fuel. Yeah, basically focused mostly on Holo specific apps, but love enjoy and building apps.
Great. Thanks, Joel. Robbie?
Hello, I'm Robbie. I'm also on the Holo team. In case people don't know, Holo is the kind of bridge between the central or regular web and Holochain apps. So it's a whole other layer on top of regular Holochain that lets you connect to a Holochain app from a URL. And I work on that stuff, specifically the connection between apps and the Holochain instances running on Holoports. It's kind of a big part of what I do. I also work on the scaffolding tool for Holochain, which is a way to quickly spin up a new Holochain app from a couple command line arguments or invocations.
Great. Thanks, Robbie. Norbu.
Hello, I am an odd bird. I'm not a developer, I'm a project manager, but I represent the components team, the team that builds the tooling and applications inside of Holochain for not only testing, dogfooding, and like first class representation of how to build Holochain apps and deploy them. and I'm here mainly to answer questions about things that we don't have app developer representation for. And I will defer any technical questions to Robbie, Matthias, Zippy, and Matthew. And yeah, glad to be here.
Great. Thank you, Norbu. All right. So now it's time to start answering questions. And by the way, I very much appreciate everyone submitting questions. I'm looking forward to the live questions as well. So as I mentioned, we have 20 questions that we're answering here that were pre-submitted in the last few weeks. So the first question, what are some not so apparent paradigm shifts when designing for and optimizing the benefits of Holochain versus traditional web structures?
I could start. When developing a thing for group content management, I had to figure out how you could have a list of agents. And I forget this paradigm shift was. Oh yeah. So if you try and in centralized systems, you're always thinking about how to prevent writes when people don't have authority. But that's not really possible when the validation has to know about everything in the past. So if you make an entry and it either has a list of agents or it points to a list of agents that have permission, that entry will forever validate the same way. So the only way to solve that problem was to use links.
Anyone else want to give their view?
Yeah, the thing that I notice people need to spend some time really getting their head around is just the agent-centric nature of it. Actually, even if you're coming from blockchain, so not even like traditional web, it's still, I guess, data-centric. But in Holochain, really, part of it is the data, and part of it is actually agents talking to each other and negotiating things. We actually have a split between integrity and coordination, and you really have to think about how every node in the network is interacting with the other nodes on the network, and imagine your code running independently on all the different agents. So that is definitely, maybe it's apparent to some people, but I think really internalizing it is a bit of a big shift.
Anyone else? Oh, yeah, Norbu, you want to unmute?
Yeah, I'll just throw in that coming from centralized paradigm, one of the big surprises is that the level of security and different way of looking at where the data lives changes what you're used to being able to do. For instance, analytics becomes a very interesting challenge when you're trying to find out how users in a decentralized network have interacted with each other. You just don't have access to anything that hasn't been implicitly shared by the agent. So you can't just blanket look at the number of transactions, or it's a very different proposition. So that was a big shift for me to understand.
Yeah. Anyone else before we move to question number 2?
Yeah.
Oh.
Sorry. No. Yeah, I just wanted to quickly touch on kind of the UX side of things. So it's also interesting how you need to present things differently if you don't have just one server where you expect data from. It's just a loading spinner, but you actually have other peers. They may or may not be online and stuff like this. You may have committed something to the DHT, but it may not have.
Nope, we just froze. Or did I?
In the UX and stuff like this. But that's actually, yeah, presenting Holochain to the end user basically is also, I think, a big part of the paradigm shift there.
Yeah, I'll just quickly, it's obviously an exciting question. We're all wanting to jump in on it. I'll just say that even as a Holochain developer, I'm constantly having to question my assumptions about how things work. And one of them is the idea that there is a network. Like we're online on the network, or there is a network, or I'm talking about what I'm doing with the network. There is no network. It's just a bunch of peers. And you always have to keep that in mind. And anything other than the raw truth that you just have a bunch of peers is an abstraction and can be useful, but can also lead you astray.
Great. All right, let's move on to question number 2. Also, is it possible to design apps that share and monetize some of your data deemed safe as an agent in the same way centralized companies would? In other words, could some apps have a side feature when you can earn Holo Fuel for being served targeted ads that act on data you've deemed okay to share?
Yeah, you could design something like this, but again, to my answer from the last question, it's agent centric. So the whole deeming safe thing will have to be programmatically represented in the code that every individual agent runs. And you can't even necessarily, well, you can't force agents to even install necessarily the code that would release that information if they don't want to. So the whole logic around what's deemed safe, if everything is set up as private by default, is something that whoever writes this app will have to figure out, basically. It's not, so the answer is yes, but there is some thinking that will need to be done.
Anyone have any other thoughts before we move on?
I would just add, like, even like you'd have to get, like David Meister just said, you'd have to get everybody to agree to install the software that releases the data. But then you also have to get them to agree to actually watch the ad because you can plug whatever UI you want onto your app. It's so easy in a peer-to-peer world, it's so easy to override the UI. So you would really have to convince people to play into your ad scheme here. And they have a lot of power to not do that.
Great. All right, question number 3. What are best practices for delivering sorted and paginated results? For example, for large result sets on get all XX queries.
Yeah, so in this case, the word paginated, I think, is probably already going a little bit down the wrong road, because when you page over something, even in a centralized system, that is already like a subtly potentially difficult issue if you do a naive implementation, because when you do a query over a page, if you think about it, the results that are on each page can actually change between when you run the queries. So you need to make sure that there's some kind of stable paging algorithm before you can actually implement pagination, so that when you go to page 2, it actually follows from page 1. And there's various ways to do that in a centralized system, but for Holochain, generally, there isn't, and a better approach would be focusing on granularity. And we have a crate in core, which is called path, and it basically makes a tree of granularity. So whatever it is that you're paging over, it could be time or space or alphabetic or whatever it is, you can break it up into granularity, and you can build a tree of the granularity, and then you can be querying over buckets, basically. And the reason you need to do that is because, like Michael said, there's no network, there's just peers. So somebody may have some data for you, and then you could ask somebody else and get a slightly different result for the same query. So you kind of have to merge several different requests over a period of time to get a full view on whatever may be out there. And in general, that doesn't sit very well with pages, but it works quite well with this like tree-based bucket polling approach. So there's examples of that around, but yeah, that's the crate in core to have a look at, the path module.
Anyone else?
I just want to note for context here that these last questions have all been really good examples of how to be shifting your thinking. So it was really nice to have this question that was given to us about how to change your mind and your thinking from agent-centric and it to, I mean, from very centralized systems to distributed systems. And here we have examples in really practical ways. Pagination seems like it's obvious, but it's not when you actually move to the decentralized world. And this is a great a great example of how you can actually deal with that in a way that's even better, because these problems even exist in centralized world. They're just most often hidden from us. And like David said, naive implementations will still get it wrong.
Yep, great. Question 4. Will the Rust Holochain client be supported or updated in the future?
Yeah, I can answer that. Well, the Rust client has recently been released. A Rust client that's compatible with version 0.2.1, and it will going further also be supported and updated. Yeah, for sure.
5. Any chance the bug signals stop working with extern crate and JIT dependency will be fixed in the 0.2x series?
Yeah, so in the series, yes. I'm not quite sure where in the series, so it's not fixed for 0.2.1, which we've released. It's on my list to look at for 0.2.2, but I don't know if it'll be in that release or the next one, but certainly in the series, yeah.
Great. 6. I saw the latest Holochain blog post about Web3 without running your own server. I think this is a critical milestone for large-scale adoption of Web3, but was disappointed to not find any tutorial on the post about what libraries to use, sample projects, etc. Can you provide a tutorial or a reference implementation?
For this one, the blog post was sort of describing how Holochain works generally. So if you get the launcher and you just run it with the App Store, you're already participating in being a server in the functioning of whatever app you choose to run. So the default GUI launcher or anything that has Holochain embedded in it is already setting you up for that. There's not really anything special that you have to do to be a participant as a server in a Holochain application.
And once again, this speaks to the question of the mindset, because what is a server and what is a client? In Holochain land, like we said, we're all peers, so we are both serving as a server, sharing data with other peers who request it, and acting as a client, requesting data from other people. So we can use that term server, and yes, it's technically correct. We are serving that data out just by running the launcher. But again, it's part of the moving your mind frame into a different place.
7. What are the current goals and status for Holochain in regards to low-code, no-code capabilities?
So there is the scaffolding tool, which is a very, very cool. It's a command line tool that lets you, like I said, just a couple of command line invocations. You can get a working Holochain app, which is, to kind of go back to the previous question, is like a distributed Web3 app in a box that you can send to other people. Everybody can use it. And you can go to developer.holochain.org. There's a link there, quick start, and that will take you through some instructions for playing with the scaffolding. So if you have kind of basically any level of dev experience, simple instructions to follow. There is a bug in this exact moment. There is a dependency problem, which I was frantically trying to fix before this call. So sometime today it will be working. It's not actually working in this moment. But yeah, I highly recommend checking that out because I think it's really cool and it lets you just stop playing with Holochain immediately.
There's also a very cool project called Generative Objects, which is a low-code system that's quite mature that builds out all kinds of web apps. And the developer of that is very interested in adding support for Holochain. I've seen some of that support. It creates Holochain applications. So if you Google generative objects, you can find that, generative objects in Holochain. I think we also have a ecosystem session with the creator of that, so that's available for people to look at.
Yep. Question 8. How is development of Deepkey coming? When can we expect to see a release?
Take that. Deepkey is well underway. We have an MVP version of the core functionality that's already released and available on GitHub at the Holochain Deepkey repository. There's also underway a Deepkey Key Explorer application, which is just in its beginnings. The plan for Deepkey includes some future work, which will be in concert with the Holochain core developers to create a conductor service that is always available in Holochain, so that key management becomes endemic to any instance of Holochain that's running. That work is not currently scheduled, but it is planned in the near future. We're in the process of planning the roadmap of that integration. That said, there are projects that are starting to consume the MVP version. We just kicked off today a project that entails a browser extension that uses the core Deepkey functionality as key management for the Holo project. And so there will be some examples of implementation of that raw MVP version of Deepkey in the coming months.
Great. Thank you, Norbu. 9, please provide an easy step-by-step guide to bridging your site from the net over to a Holochain host. Anyone?
So this is an interesting question, because it assumes the idea of a website as something that's pulled from a server, and so this is actually and it's just simply that, static pages. And Holochain is actually for live applications that that you build the application, you have to build it in the Holochain framework. And I think Robbie might be able to speak to some of the documentation about how you take your current Holochain-based application and convert that into a Holo hosted-based application, which would be part of what would need to be done to do that. So yeah, it's also so the thing that we're providing with Holochain is this ability to create shared applications that are complicated and are user data-based ones, not regular hosting of a brochureware type site. But even that will be able to be done by Holo when the time is right.
Great. Number 10, we're halfway through the pre-submitted questions. If you want to help develop on Holochain, how can I find out what bugs and issues you have that are beginner friendly?
Cool. Yeah, I would like to do more of this. So as I said when I introduced myself, I spend a fair bit of time on GitHub looking at issues people are submitting. It's not particularly easy to get PRs into Holochain at the moment because our CI isn't set up to build pull requests from people outside the organization. So the best way to get started is to open an issue or come to our office hours in Discord and start a conversation with us if you want to work on something, and we will figure out how to make that work.
And by the way, the office hours are scheduled about every 2 weeks. Number 11, can you update us on the latest resolutions as it relates to the gossiping of nodes? Has there been an improvement with the topology dynamics of nodes? Please elaborate. Thank you.
So this question wasn't clear which version the author was on. So there was actually a huge change to the networking. It's an issue. It hasn't made it fully all the way through to all the downstream things. But in terms of improving the gossiping, generally what we're actually working on at the moment is improving our ability to model and test it, because what we see is all the tests that we have generally passing on CI. We don't ship things if stuff's failing, but then when it goes out into the real world, you can get issues reported, whatever it is, latency or not getting things gossiped or whatever. So if there's a mismatch between what we're hearing from people and what we're seeing in our tests, then the tests have to improve so that we see the same thing. And we've got a few initiatives there. One is generative testing of network models, so we can generate network topologies and then apply them. Another is spinning up more distributed infrastructure, so less of the tests are running on a single machine, because a lot of issues that you see won't manifest unless you actually have more of a real network, because when everything's running local, it's much easier to get everything to gossip instantly, pass reliably, etc., etc. So yeah, we're just basically building out the infrastructure so we can cache things. I don't think anything fundamentally has changed to the gossiping model. It's more about finding edge cases and fixing bugs as they come up.
Question 12, and this is directly to Eric. Regarding the developer case study article, I would like to know, based on experience, whether or not you think other devs creating apps on the infrastructure will find other bugs with their implementations. In other words, do you think the infrastructure can be fully bug proof, or do you think it's a continuous process of finding these bugs and addressing them as the infrastructure develops to suit a particular use case?
Yeah, well, I would love it if we could produce provably correct code in an agent-centric networking environment, but I don't think we have the capacity to do that, nor does anybody else. And so we rely on people hitting edge cases and finding bugs. But we also rely on the kind of testing that David was just talking about, which is a critical aspect for us. So there's a loop here. Some of the things and some of the edge cases that we can't figure out to test for will be discovered by app developers, and that's how we'll know about them. And then we'll add them into our testing infrastructure. And so it will become more and more bug proof. Of course, the testing infrastructure itself has bugs in it. And so there's a kind of infinite regress. This is I think provably unsolvable thing to have it be perfect. But I think the thing that we really do have, and I'm really excited about these initiatives that David was talking about, is a path to dealing with the fact that this is just true. We're always in a loop of finding edge cases and discovering what doesn't work. And yet, if we have a good setup and a good path in our development team for being able to handle that and then add tests in for those cases when we find them, then it becomes more and more stable with a nice asymptotic curve. And that's our hope.
Great. Question 13. When will we be able to run a Holochain app with the user downloading an executable?
Yeah, I can take this one. I think that's possible already for a long time. And the best example is Acorn, probably, which is a great Holochain application for group management. And if you want to test it, you can download it on acorn.software. And there are also, like, if you want to actually build one yourself, you can. There are two templates that get you running relatively quickly. One is for Electron and one is for Tauri. Both frameworks produce cross-platform executables. And the links will be shared, I think, in one of the slides. And also, if you have questions around that, you can just always reach out on the DevHC Discord and ask for that.
Question 14. How can Holochain interact with blockchains and specifically Bitcoin?
Yeah, I can take this one. So obviously Holochain and blockchains like Bitcoin are different things with different use cases, but it's interesting to think how the two technologies could work together. And I haven't done any work with Bitcoin specifically, unfortunately, but I have been exploring some use cases around Holochain and Ethereum can work together. And there's two like broad use cases I've explored and built proof of concepts for. The first one is linking by reference. So in this case, we used some data on Holochain as the linked media payload for an NFT on Ethereum. And usually if people want to make their NFT media decentralized, they'll use something like IPFS because it's really not practical to store all the data for your NFT on a blockchain because of the gas for storage. Drawback is when you store the media on IPFS, it's static. But if you do it on Holochain, you can have the NFT media be dynamic and also validated according to the HAP validation rules. So we did this by having matching unforgeable references on both the Holochain side and the Ethereum side. And we derived those from the data itself, and they use this public key, the public key on Ethereum. So on the Holochain side, they were able to prove that they own an Ethereum wallet. And then on the Ethereum side, it's enforced by the blockchain itself. And you could produce these matching keys. So when you went to go find an NFT, it would link to reference the link base in Holochain, and it was unforgeable on both sides. So only that the person who linked, or the the link between those two keys, the agent that linked those two keys could have produced that reference. And then the second case I've been exploring is basically a bridge, similar to how the bridges between blockchains work, where you have a third-party oracle look at some state on either Ethereum or Holochain, sign that information to produce a cryptographic proof, and then the other side can take that proof as a source of truth for what happened. So that lets you do things like you can build a token-gated Holochain app, so you can only access some space in a Holochain app if you hold a minimum threshold of tokens on Ethereum. Or you could do the reverse, where you have some activity on Holochain and you want to do some token distributions on the Ethereum side. You can have this oracle look at the activity on Holochain, sign it to prove it, and then someone could take that proof into the Ethereum, into like a smart contract, and then get a token payout. So yeah, so they're the two broad use cases. The main difference is the first type doesn't require an oracle because you're just using a reference to link the two rather than a state bridge. But in the second case, you do need like a third party oracle. There's going to be a link at the end of this presentation with some videos of demos of the different things I've been doing.
Great. Thanks, Josh. Make sure I didn't skip too far ahead. Next, previous. Okay. How difficult would it be to support another language on the client side? Are the developer tools the only thing that would change, or are there dependencies in the conductor that would need to be amended?
Yeah, I can take that one. It's possible to support another language, and there is a C# client that, as I can see, David Adams is in this call as well. He has been working on, and I've been supporting him. So I'm very happy to support any efforts going into venturing into other languages to clarify the protocol. And the developer tools. No, the conductor remains untouched. It's basically, it has an API, and you need to implement the matching client following that API protocol. Nothing has to be changed in the conductor.
One of the things that I would say about that is that there's the one way to connect to the conductor is through a WebSocket connection. So it doesn't matter what language you're coming from, as long as you can make that WebSocket connection and encode the calls according to the API correctly, it will work. And so you can do that in a lot of different ways. The other way you can do it is you can actually do it as native calls and bind the Holochain conductor to your Rust application and make the calls directly, because the conductor exists as a library. And so one of the easy languages to use is Rust as your client code, and build it in a Towery application, for example.
Thank you. 16, how difficult would it be to support another data storage model than the one proposed by current developer tools, which emulate a database table model? Other models could be data structures similar to Redis or EAV, similar to Datomic and clones.
Yeah, so this question, because it just says developer tools, I wasn't totally sure if it was talking about the clients or if it was talking about the actual Holochain conductor backend. So there is a database SQLite inside Holochain, and we had an EAV system previously in the past, actually. The reason we're using SQLite is because we want like the transactional atomic guarantees, and there's the SQL cipher for encryption, etc. So we've done other things in the past, so we could theoretically swap it out for something different, but I'm not sure what the benefits would be. On the client side, you can take the data from the Holochain instance and you could put it into another model and then point your client at that and basically treat it like a cache. I actually years ago did something with DataScript, which is a JavaScript clone of Datomic. And it was relatively easy, actually. I was using a cell in Clojure to wrap a data script database and pull the source chain and then pull new data structures into the data script as they got committed into the source chain. And then I built a GUI on top of that. Wasn't that difficult. So if you can pull stuff, if you can lift things up into the client, then remember that Holochain's always running locally. So you don't have long latency that you would have if you were like trying to round trip to a data center. You're just round tripping things that is local. And the main deal with is if you have, you've got two sources of truth. So I think that's the main problem. If you make a mistake and the two databases or the two data models disagree, then you might run into problems. But the basic idea is there if you want to.
The one other thing I might say is that the data model, the main data model to think about Holochain through is that it is a graphing DHT. So it's this distributed hash table with links that points to other pieces. And so some of the things that people have done is they've taken GraphQL and they've just put that on top of Holochain as a GraphQL access to creating and Holochain entries and creating links between them. So there's that whole way to go as well. And any graph, you can convert it and think about it into lots of different ways. So that underlying graph capability of the DHT, not of a given source chain, but all the data together, there's a lot of different ways to think about how to do that. And again, that's from the client side.
Question 17, mobile support. The DWeb camp published the bar for mobile support. What's next and how important is that in the overall roadmap?
So I will say that this is the second most important thing to us in the overall roadmap. The first one is stability, stability, stability. And so you heard a lot of what the Holochain core team was focusing on is all of those deep underlying testing capacities and careful ability. That's our top priority, so that we really can rely on the infrastructure. The second thing is actually mobile support. And so we have we have people who have done testing of running Holochain both on Android and on iOS and compiling to it. There's a lot of different paths, and the roadmap to mobile, full mobile, will be long and will contain different ways of going. But we've started with a thing that we're calling zero arc, which is dealing with the fact that mobile platforms tend to try to shut down memory and network hungry apps. And so we have to have a first place to start is having the mobile client not do a lot of gossiping and not store a lot of the data. But it does mean that the source chain can be committed from the mobile device. And so we've done some testing on that. And this is a important thing for us. We really think it's pretty critical.
18. Privacy. Is there any intent to augment the privacy of Holochain applications, notably with respect to geographic and IP location linkage? WebRTC is known for that.
I would say that the main answer to this question is, of course, that we're always interested in augmenting privacy concerns as they show up and as people say, hey, this doesn't work for our use case, and what can we do with that? WebRTC is our networking path, is the current one that gives us the most access to well-supported, widespread capability. And so if there are issues around this, I'm sure that we're not the only people who are trying to deal with that. And there are other people, and so we'll be able to piggyback on that as well. And so I think I can't say anything specific that we've been focusing on any one of these things specifically. Like I said, our other priorities are a little bit higher right now, but anything that's brought to our attention that really matters for a use case, well, we put that stuff in the pipe and prioritize it.
Something there, which is the WebRTC is the most recent networking implementation, but on the back end, the networking is set up so that you can have multiple implementations. And previously we were using Quick rather than WebRTC. But yeah, as Eric alluded to, they didn't, the crates that we could find, all of them weren't mature enough for what we needed. And if they were, we would have kept using them, I'm sure, because it was a huge effort to switch. But the fact that you can have different ones running on your system, currently they're behind a compiler flag, but if we had a second or third networking implementation that was actually mature, maybe we could dust off what we were doing with Quick, or like do something different if there was a different crate, then you would be able to use it. There's nothing that forces you to use one particular networking implementation or another, other than the implementation has to exist. So I'm sure we could do that if WebRTC was really a problem.
Yeah, and I will add on to that, that as a core design feature, one of the things that we've been holding for from the very, very, very beginning is that Holochain is not even IP centric, that we expect there to be transport implementations over USB, over Wi-Fi, over carrier pigeon. Well, maybe not carrier pigeon, but that's the kind of thing that we really wanted there to be, that kind of resilience, especially for mesh networks and new networking architectures that come up. And I think the design is solid for that. It just actually having a reliable transport is not a simple problem. And so, like David said, it took a lot of energy to switch from one to the other and to deal with things that are in the current world, like network address translation and crossing the local area network boundary. That's really hard to do really well. And WebRTC does a decent job of that, which is one of the reasons why we switched to it.
Right. All right, the next two questions I'm going to answer. Oops, some reason I went. Okay. So when will the online video version of the developer training come out? What about self-paced training? So let me provide a little context. So we have people, well, let me start with this. People have different kind of learning preferences, right? Some people like to read, some people like to watch videos, some people like to have in-person training and so forth. Me personally, I like a combination of methods. It helps me learn, especially difficult subjects. So I like doing like self-paced training first, and then go if someone offers an online, or excuse me, a online training and an in-person training, I definitely want personally to go to the in-person training because I have a proctor there, right? I have a teacher. I have other developers I can ask questions to. So I like to do my homework first, try to go through some self-paced training, and then if they offer it, I want to go in person if I really want to get deep and have my questions answered. So that's my personal learning style. People have different modalities of learning. So with that said, we have this great in-person training that Marcus does. We're about ready to do our second one, October 2nd. And it's a full week of training, and it's in person. It's, from what I've heard, I haven't taken it because I'm new, but I heard it's just wonderful training. His methodology and the way he goes about his training isn't great for us to just take that training and put it out there and publish it. So we're doing a lot of editing. So we're in the process of actually doing that. So there's a lot of editing effort involved, and breaking it up into chapters and having it in kind of consumable chunks, if you will. So we're working on that. Now, the second part of the question, when can you expect to see self-paced training? We've just, I know this has been in discussion probably before I had joined the company, and I've been involved in the discussions since I've joined, and this is an absolute priority, right? This is different than what we'll publish as a video version of the training that we have that Marcus does. So we definitely want it to start out from the very beginning, going through the process that you see on our portal, our developer portal, where you can step by step, load the developer environment and start, building an app in a day kind of thing. And we want to make that consumable, written with examples, sample code, things like that. So that's something that we are going to absolutely do, and it's an absolute priority. The other thing, there's a lot of things that I'm interested in doing going forth around that. So the other thing that we do, of course, is we publish dev polls, right? So that gives you updates and things like that. And we have various documentation. One of the things that I'm going to champion going forward is to ask the developer community out there, the experienced developers, to write guest blog posts. And at my previous company, I did that. I did developed a program for external developers so that they can contribute to the community. And one of the things that we asked them was to write blog posts. And developers maybe like to write code, but not necessarily like to write blog posts. But I acted as their editor-in-chief, just had them throw it over the wall. There might be some iteration, but I always ask them to put in working sample code and have that linked to GitHub, right? You can have gists, for instance, and explain the code. So there's a lot of difficult concepts. We've answered some of those, but it's really nice to have coding examples that demonstrate best practices and things like that. So that's another angle that I'm going to be working on shortly. So it won't be just about online video training and self-pet training, but we're also going to have timely topics and best practices that get published as well. And that kind of segues into the next question. You know, how are you planning to improve the documentation to reduce the steep learning curve in building Holochain apps? So great question. You know, it's always a challenge for any organization to keep documentation updated. As you know, we've been in alpha for quite some time, and now have moved into the beta. The sands have kind of shifted under people's feet here and there. We've had to update documentation. There's still stuff that probably could be updated, and we're identifying those and updating them as best we can. We'll continue to improve that process. That's something that I'll also have a focus on. And you know, definitely would love to hear from you. Like, where are you having difficulty? You know, when you say that there's a steep learning curve, you know, that obviously is relative to different people. So I would like to personally hear where you're having trouble, and so how we can improve, you know, what we write, how we explain it. So I put the question back onto you is, you know, give us feedback, you know, specific feedback, you know, general feedback's great, but having specific cases where, you know, you see a particular deficit or hole in our documentation, our training, how we support you, all those things are important for us to know. But we, you know, we have blind spots just like every other human. We don't see everything. What's obvious to Eric or Matthias or David is not obvious to me, for instance, right? We come from different backgrounds, we have different different experiences, and so we all need to express where we're having difficulty, and then we definitely want to help you overcome any barrier you have to building Holochain applications. That's
just lost you for
really
a bit
my
there.
job. Go ahead, David. Yes.
We just lost you for like 30 seconds.
Oh, wow. So I got to backtrack. Must be my
Yeah.
satellite. Must have got Elon Musk satellite. I need a couple more satellites up here. So what I was saying, I'm sorry you lost me for 30 seconds, was that it's important. You know, we have blind spots, and we have different contexts which we learn, experience, and so forth. So we need to hear your feedback where you're having difficulty, because our job, my job, is to make the experience better for you. And that experience is going to be different from others. So I need to hear from you where the deficits are, where the holes are, so we can fill those and provide the best learning environment, the best application development environment that we can possibly put forth for you to be an efficient developer and to build apps. So we want you to build the best apps possible in the most efficient manner. So I guess we're going to move to live questions. And I know that Nathan's been helping me with that, or helping us with that. So I'm having trouble navigating. There we go. So, all the Q&A is empty now. There were some that were answered. So,
oh yeah, we've just been typing answers.
Yeah, so let me just, so people, in case they didn't know, so can Holochain run on a browser or smartphones? that was kind of answered by David Meister. He said that the Holochain binary is Rust and needs more than can be done with just WASM currently. So it can't run directly in the browser, but the browser can easily be a client to Holochain so that the GUI can be in the browser for sure. For smartphones, it would come down to compiling the Rust for the smartphone as a compilation target, which I haven't done personally, but I believe other people have. Any other comments there for anyone? Okay.
Just that there was like 3 or 4 questions about browser and smartphone. So there's like a few answers, and also I think Eric talked about it during the main questions as well. So it seems to be a hot topic.
Yep. And AP asked, "What
we
is?"
know it's a hot topic. This is why it's a big priority. Like the question was about priority, and also we really have seeing some interesting results on that, and you will all see more about it.
Yep. Okay, so the next question was by AP. What is Holodex and is it still active? And then Joel answered that question. He said Holodex was a DNA that could be used as an indexing engine. I do not think it's been active. And I think I was kind of, before I joined Holochain, I thought that was interesting and I looked into it. And then when I joined, I asked that question. So I too believe it's not active.
But I will say that it will be. This is a really important bit of tooling that the components team will take up at some point or another, or other people hopefully will contribute from the open source world, which is the ability to do indexing of DHTs, to be able to do fast searching where people can choose an indexer. So instead of basically having Google suck everything up, you might say, I'm interested in sharing my data and picking this particular node as an indexer, or I am willing to be an indexer in the DHT for there to be able to be fast queries, and then indexers can share data between them. So there's some interesting work that's being thought through about how to do that, and it's an important piece of tech that needs to be out there, and we will add that if somebody else doesn't get to it sooner.
Okay. So the next question was asked by Francois. Pagination can also happen from a single point in time, I suppose, or is that another conventional mindset? So Michael answered, time-based pagination isn't foolproof either, since there can be a peer holding data that you don't know about yet because you're currently not connected to them, but then later you get connected and the earlier data becomes available. So we talked about this obviously in a question, but there's more of some elaboration. Any other comments there, Michael, or anyone else? Okay, I'll move on to the next one. Enrico asked, hello, thanks for this Dev AMA. Thank you, Enrico, for attending. Is it possible to run the Holochain conductor on Android in the background? I've read a bunch of topics with the same question in the forum. I've read also Android support PWA background workers, but I think they're just JavaScript code. Thanks. And David Meister chimed in and said, I think Eric is talking about this now roughly, which may be not yet, but hopefully soon. So.
I think we already answered this question.
Yep. Just want to acknowledge that all the questions that were asked live. Jason asked, I have little space on my main partition, but have 45 gigabytes of extra space. I remember previously had a Nix partition on a different CPU, and it seemed like it was another directory that used a lot of space. Would 45 gigabytes of space be enough to be sufficient, but at a beginner level to work with? And David Meister answered, if you're compiling Holochain, then Rust will create pretty large artifacts. I've had 100 to 200 gigabyte directories from Rust, but if you use Holochain as a binary and just include it whenever you're doing it, it will be small. And then Gregory added, I've just cleaned my Nix development environment and then started an HAP development shell. I needed 6.5 gigabytes to get started with that. Although, as David said, you will find that it grows as you keep developing. So you'll need to clean it up with something like Nix storage GC when you run low on space. And then Jason asked, is there ability to be hooked into an existing website, like a karma feature for forums? And then David answered, so when you run Holochain, it's available on WebSockets. So any website could try to point to a local running Holochain. For example, if a user is running Launcher and provide extra features in the website, it can be found to be running.
This is also a use case for Holo, which is not publicly available yet, but once Holo is, this is going to be something you can do with Holo, where your app is running on the Holo network and your UI is a hybrid between a traditional web UI that's connecting to a centralized server with some calls to Holochain via Holo.
And I think maybe one thing I would like to add there is that it's that any website could just call into any one conductor, so you wouldn't need to solve the problem of authorizing that website to access your conductor. I guess that's just something that you need to have some kind of handshake, probably, if that, yeah, I assume.
And then Fritz asked, for the reserve accounts, has a team been following the talks of countries, BRIC nations, moving away from the dollar and reserve currency, hoping to design gold-backed currency? If so, you thought possibly considering to add such gold-backed currencies, one of the mechanisms for one of the reserves in these countries? So this is not really a developer question, obviously. Lisa answered the question. I'm just going to move on and go to the next question, because the scope of the developer AMA is really around developer questions. Let's see. The next question was David Elams. Hey, David, it's good to have you join us. When will you add mobile support such as Light HC Conductor, especially for Unity, so we can use it in our geolocation AR game? Our one world or our world is C#/Unity Holochain client, Holo net. Thank you. And then David answered, in the past, people had Holochain working in Unity. I don't know why the current state of things would cause problems with Unity. We don't have anything in our CI that would flag issues with Unity specifically, so I'm not sure either way. So anyone want to chime in on that?
Again, this is a mobile question, and so the mobile part has already been answered. So as far as it's gone, the end support, the end place mobile is where we actually have a whole conductor built in WASM, so you can run it in as we call it, the light client. But that will be the last place that we get to in building that. And so I can't answer anything about timing.
Okay, fair enough. David then asks, would you say the Holochain API is stable enough now for us to begin work on the long planned .NET HDK? So Eric, do you want to answer the stability question as far as the APIs go?
I think didn't David answer that?
Oh
in
yeah,
there?
sorry, I
Yeah,
misread
it's a
that.
very
Yeah.
good answer.
Yeah, David said, okay, make sure I'm looking at the right one. Okay, yeah, actually, sorry, my screen keeps shifting because people are asking questions, so that's what throws me off. So forgive me. Okay, yeah, actually, you'll see that I'm versioning host functions and keeping backward compatibility for older versions in parallel as much as I can. Look at DNA info 1 and 2 for example of that. You want to elaborate a little bit on that, David, at all?
Sure. So the Holochain API from the perspective of the HDK is stable. So we had to make a change to the DNA info API recently because there was some information that devs wanted access to that they couldn't access to. So rather than changing the DNA info call, I just made a DNA info 2. And then I updated all the references to DNA info in the HDK API to point to version 2. So if you were running a existing WASM that you'd already compiled previously, it would continue pointing to 1. If you were going to write a new app tomorrow, it would point to version 2. And for some reason you wanted to write a new app, but point back to version 1, there was a way that you could dial into, you could basically skip the sugar layer and dial straight into version 1 manually. And that basic pattern applies to callbacks as well, because I had to change the inputs and outputs for the callback, because one of the callbacks was taking DNA info as a parameter. So that's the basic pattern that I think we will try to follow generally. I've kind of socialized it with other people on the team. I'm hoping everyone sticks to it. And it means that if you're writing an app now, for as long as we can support it, we will try to support the API. And also, this maybe is more elaboration than you're expecting, but also there's an interface now where you can query what host functions, including their versions, are actually supported on the conductor. So if you look at your WASM and you use the default WASM tooling, you can extract the functions that it expects, and you can ask any conductor since some release from I guess 3 or 6 months ago now, what it actually implements, and then you can cross-reference the two, because if there's a change to a host function, it might not actually be one that you're using. So it shouldn't impact you if you're not using it. So you can actually do, it's kind of I guess, it's not exactly, it's kind of like feature detection, or if you use can I use, or if you're using shims and stuff in JavaScript, you have to detect whether the version of the browser that you're using supports the feature that you're trying to use. There's sort of a bit of that natively built into the conductor now. So when you write a WASM, it will, even if something breaks, hopefully it won't impact you if you're not using the thing that broke. And even if we change something, we'll try to do it in a creative way rather than in a way that modifies something that you were previously using.
David,
I just also want to make a quick note on this, that this was a carefully thought out solution to the very difficult problem of versioning. And for a while, we were going to try to use version numbering, matching, and all the rest of the stuff so you could detect this. But David realized, hey, this is how you can do this on a per function basis. And so I think this creates a lot of stability in the face of the ability to be able to evolve at the same time, because we always need to be able to balance that, the evolutionary capacity of this underlying system and its stability.
And I will say though, sorry, just to slightly contradict what I just said, but the stability is largely focusing on the integrity stuff, and probably if there's going to be changes, it would be in the coordination stuff. But still, I think we would try to version it. But because I think coordinators don't get hashed into the DNA hash, and people can uninstall, people can change them basically on the conductor themselves. I think if we had to choose between stability in the coordinator for the sake of, for example, inventing a parallel HDK versus users' needs, I think we would have to prioritize users' needs, because we know that they could reinstall the new ones. But that's kind of the only exception, and we don't have any of that planned immediately, but I could see that coming up.
But again, that is, you weren't contradicting me, I'm going to say, because what that's doing is it's balancing those two pieces, where the balance is around existing WASMs that are about the validation portion and the integrity. So it's part of that balancing act, and part of why we actually came up with and shifted to coordinator zones versus integrity zones, so we could be holding that balancing as best we could. But you're right about it does contradict the point that we may do some breaking change in some portions of the API. That's correct.
Yeah, but not the bit that you hash into your DNA, hopefully.
So I just wanted to say I appreciate your elaboration, David and Eric. I think when, if we have the information to share, to have these types of discussions, I think are meaningful. So thank you for that. And David also asked, let's see, I got to make sure I get this right. When do you estimate that Holochain will be out out of beta, or when would you say that Holochain will be stable with little breaking changes? So we have devs know it's a good time to build on Holochain without having to keep refactoring our code, which some of us do not have time to keep doing. Thank you. And David answered, you don't have to keep refactoring your code because the HDK API hasn't changed in a while, as far as I know. Been versioning and stabilizing the host functions for a while. Holochain beta is more about bug fixes and QA and things on the network, etc. And then Michael added, we may introduce breaking changes between minor releases, for example, 0.2.x to 0.3.x. But as David said, HDK API changes are increasingly rare. Also, we make a strong effort to not change anything like the HDK API within a minor release line. So if you need absolute stability, stick to a minor release. But even when jumping releases, you shouldn't see major API changes at this point. Does anyone want to?
Just a tiny elaboration on it. The last time I had to change something around this, the change took me all of 30 seconds global search and replace. So the kinds of things we're doing are sensible naming, things that the name is bad, or there's a couple things that just, it turns out to be really easy to do the change, and it's in favor of ergonomics, making it easier for new people to adopt and use it. And so they're that kind of change when they have to be done, but they're typically very easy to add. So time, it's a little bit of a pain. Yes, I hate it myself, being one of the first people to get hit with it, but it's not a big time sink.
And then there's two open questions. One is, what are the most interesting apps built on Holo, and how do you bring about more Holochain adoption? So I just want to plug Acorn. When I joined Holochain and back in November, I started, or excuse me, in June, I started June 1st. What made it real for me, because I did a lot of research, I watched about every video, I was lurking around and checking out, going up on GitHub and making sure everything was real, seeing all the commits and so forth before joining. And then when I installed Acorn, when Mary had me install Acorn and sharing our kind of our project plans and wanting to give me visibility and kind of the overall Uber strategy thinking at Holochain from the executive level, that's when it became real to me, and I fell in love with Acorn. I thought the UI was beautiful, the nice curving lines, and if you've joined our happy hour, the last three versions of it, the last three sessions, Matt and I have been showing off Acorn. So I'm bullish on Acorn personally. There's other apps, Art showed me talking stickies. Art actually was here at my cabin for a week before going off to Europe, and I liked talking stickies a lot. There are a lot of interesting applications, but that's just my perspective. So it's coming in, it's some interesting, I think the work that Adam is doing and Neighborhoods is really interested. One of the projects I thought was really cool when I came in and I had a lot of questions around was Red Grid, because of the power stuff. This off-grid, this cabin you see in the background is off-grid. I have like 28 solar panels. I'm not connected to the grid. If I had more power, I could probably sell it back to the utility. I thought that was really a cool project. There were a lot of things. I come from the ERP background, right? At Microsoft, I was the technical evangelist for ERP. I worked with everyone except SAP. We had a whole big team there. And then my last company, we were a cloud-based ERP. In case you don't know what that is, it's enterprise resource planning. It's larger accounting systems. And there's project around HERA, or I think those are interesting paradigms in accounting and what we're doing. So that's just my perspective. Those are the kind of the interesting projects, and I think there'll be some really good adoption around that. That's just my personal opinion. Anyone else want to chime in on what their favorite apps or what they think strategically to help answer that question?
Well, it's a little bit not a dev question. So I'm actually more interested in jumping to Casey's question about succinctly, why are you all choosing to develop in Holochain rather than anywhere else?
Yep.
So there was a couple of us answered that question. I said, because there's no other platform that provides the depth of decentralization and scalability that Holochain does. And that's just me being biased. Maybe that statement isn't true. Somebody might disagree with that, but I like it. And I'd love it if other people would answer their feelings about this.
Yeah.
I come from a Web 2 background, actually, and well, I guess it's been quite a while since I've done Web 2 work, but I did more than like a decade in Web 2. That's enough. And I kind of came to Holochain through getting stuck in what I wanted to do with Web 2.
How were you stuck?
Just succinctly.
Okay, great. You were stuck. You couldn't
Yeah.
go forward. Michael, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I'd like to. Well, I noticed that in your answer you said platform, and I want us to go beyond that notion. Like the question itself asks, like, why are you choosing to develop on Holochain rather than anywhere else? That's kind of this Web 2 mentality, and there's a bit of that in Web 3 with like, which blockchain are you going to build on and stuff like that. And certainly in Web 2, there's like, what platform are you going to build on? Holochain is a framework. It's a set of tools for making peer-to-peer apps. There's no reason why your app has to use only Holochain. Holochain is just the way I see it, it's a comprehensive set of tools to build peer-to-peer apps, including gossiping, publishing your data, validating it, kicking out bad actors. Any other tool set would do the same thing. Holochain is just something that we're focused on building to make those tools. So I see that the kinds of apps that Holochain is allowing you to build, you don't have to choose Holochain to build them. It's just that that's a really good tool set to use. And I think we will be seeing more and more tool sets like this in the future. And I wouldn't discourage anybody from using any other tool that fits the bill. So it's really a question, for me, the question is really, why are you choosing to build pure peer-to-peer applications? And I can't be succinct about that, but there's some very good reasons. Norbu?
Yeah, I just want to throw in from a maybe slightly more macro point of view. Inside of Holochain and in our close community, we're super excited about pure decentralization and experiments around pure decentralization and what is possible, how we can model that and build and show experiments and examples of what is possible. But that is literally the tiniest tip of the iceberg of Holochain's capacity. There's a whole world of hybridized, centralized and decentralized, and all kinds of possibilities that anyone could do. And part of the beauty and why I love Holochain is that we literally build nothing that prevents you from doing that. We have no notion of that Holochain is the way. Holochain, like Michael said, is a tool set and is agnostic to how you decide to build and use it. You can do whatever you want. And I find that to be rare in this dev community at large.
I could also add something maybe. For me, it's kind of like an antidote against silos. Like if you think, I don't know, lots of the tools that we use, like we need to sign in there, we need to sign in there, we need to kind of have a ton of different accounts, and Holochain has kind of, through this agent-centric architecture, it's kind of, you are basically the one combining your own contexts and matching them together. And so you can just build stuff that you could not possibly build in centralized architectures, like composing UIs that draw data from various different contexts together and present them for you. Like, yeah, it's just like it offers capacities that centralized tools simply cannot do. That's really exciting. That's just really exciting to me. Yep.
Okay, so we have another question on the topic of private data. Towards the end of our Holochain roadmap, there's an item on selectively revealing fields from private entries with use of Merkle trees. Two questions. Was there a particular use case or demand that made this feature deserving on the roadmap? And then the second piece is, have you discussed extending this feature to make use of ZKPs, such as the contents of private entries can be P2P, peer-to-peer validated without revealing their contents? Anyone want to take that?
Matthew, you're working on this. Do you want to talk about it?
I'm working on like the Merkle tree part, which kind of touches this, but I don't really know the use case that it's for. Like I know I'm trying to, in the testing, mimic like a driver's license information so that you can keep all the various pieces private and only reveal parts of it. That's about as far as I've gone with relating to this, but I haven't done any research into ZKPs.
So one of the things that I'll say is that there's a whole class of things that you would like to be able to do in distributed architectures that are hard to do. And here's one of them. Shuffle a deck. Play a card game with a shuffled deck. How do you do that when you don't have some central place that you're providing the authority to? Or roll a die. Right. So if I roll a die, how do I do that? Well, one of the things that you can do is you can commit a private entry and then reveal the hash of the private entry and then reveal it later. So after the person used the die roll, and then you can say, okay, then you know that they did it ahead of time and they chose the secret number. And so there's a bunch of problems like that, that if you want to actually have independent actors that where you don't want revelation of data, this is exactly what you want Merkle tree solutions for. And it's also an efficiency thing. You can do a bunch of you can solve these problems more efficiently if you can put a Merkle tree into one entry and partially reveal part of the data as you go forward. So there has been some discussion about ZKPs internally, about how we can use them. And we've been hoping and assuming that the community will dive in and do that, because it's a really fun and interesting area of research. And there are obviously, like you're saying here, there are things that are really cool that could be done about them and with them.
Also, can I just add that we don't have to do anything for you to write validation logic?
Yeah.
So I don't actually think that we could do anything even if we wanted to, unless there was something that we needed to add as a host function. But if there's a Rust crate that does the validation, then you should use it, basically.
All right, so I'm going to move on out of the live questions. And just share with you the developer resources. Most of you have been with us for a while, are very aware of our dev portal, and hopefully you've gone through the quick start, the Git building, read the core concepts, and read through the programming references that we have, GitHub with the code and other projects. The Holochain blockchain examples, you can click on that link when we make it available. Probably should copy this and put it in the chat and provide it for you. Also, just some of the standalone cross-platform executable example. I'd mentioned Acorn, that's one. The Electron template, there's a link there, and then the Tauri template there. And then, as I said in the beginning, I always like to have at the end a developer call to action. So I think as a DevRel person, the thing that we want is engagement, right? So please engage with the Holochain community, be active, share your knowledge, ask for help if you get stuck on something. Don't beat your head into a pulp. Just go up on our Discord server and ask. Show up to our developer hour that we do every couple of weeks. Come to our next developer AMA. We do plan to do these on a quarterly basis. So I'm really big about rhythms. So, I like to have 2 big events during the year, every 6 months apart. Like to have quarterly events. So this will serve as a quarterly event. And then, every couple week rhythm around, just making sure that we're people are struggling. We have a office hours for developers. And then you can ask questions on our Discord server as well. So if you get stuck, ask for help. Attend our events. I'm really happy that those of you who made it. We record these. So I'm really big on capturing knowledge. So I like to record everything, make it available. So if you can't make it, half the world is asleep right now. The other half is awake with us, perhaps. So if it's not convenient for you in the future, just register. We'll send a link after we do a post-production and we'll get that out. There'll be other events that we have. Like one of the big things that I'm working on is a online DevCon, right? Developer conference. So I'm looking at having something that's 3 days, 3 to 4 hours. So it's not going to take your whole day. So that's an event that online event that I'm working on. I'm also keen on doing a podcast in the future. I don't know if you noticed my cup when I'm drinking. So when I was at Acumatica, I had this, we produced these episodes called Coffee and Code. So we would think up a topic in advance, just a general topic. It could be something on Holochain. It could be on branching strategies, right? How do you do release cycles and do branching strategies and things like that? How do you, what's the best way to keep up on technology and learning, things like that. So general things, but it's not like a webinar. It's not something that's produced where we share knowledge. It's really a casual conversation between developers on a particular topic that we have, and then record that and produce it. So there's a lot of ideas and things that I've done in the past that I hope to do here as for my job as head of developer relations. And so expect to see other events, other activities. We'll keep iterating and hopefully making improvements around documentation, around training, around sharing knowledge in ways like this, and DevCon and so on and so forth. So that feeds well into the last item, number 5. Give us feedback. Let me know what we can do better. And the next slide is how you do that is you can contact me directly. So if you have feedback, like what did you like about the AMA? What could we do better? Let me know. What things are missing, in the documentation. Provide feedback. Without your feedback, we can't, like I said, we have blind spots. We can't make improvements if we don't know what we're not doing a good job of something, right? So I'm here. That's part of my job. So you can contact me either on Discord as Urban Woodsman, or you can contact me through email. The other thing that I'll mention is I've been holding off, but one of the things that's important to me is building relationships. I mean, part of the job title is developer relations. So the most important part of that for me is relationships. So I want to get to know you personally. So I will be sending out probably later today or Thursday a questionnaire to all of you and others who've attended different events, asking for specific information. If you'd like to engage with me, start building that relationship with me, please fill out the form. So I'll be sending that email out. And I want to also know, if you're on Discord, it's kind of hard to know, who's this Urban Woodsman on there? Well, until I kind of revealed myself and put in my name on the Holochain Discord server, nobody knew who I was. And I waited until after I was hired. Matter of fact, I probably waited a week before after I was hired. But I want to know you too. So if you're on Discord, I don't know you as, Cha-Cha. I'm just making that up off the top of my head. Cha-Cha means nothing to me. So until I know who you are, it's hard for me to remember you and so forth. But the bottom line is I want to build relationships. I want to hear your feedback. I want us to do the best job we can at providing the tools and the resources that help you build Holochain apps efficiently. That's my job, is to listen to you and to advocate for you on your behalf and try to deliver and have that delivered. So thank you. Appreciate everyone who joined today, especially our panelists. As you can see, we had 14 and we're now 13, but we have 13 people online. This represents a large portion of Holochain's core developer and app developer team, and even some developers on the Holo side of the fence. So I'm very appreciative of the support I've received from our internal developers. So thank you. And also a big thank you for those who are here today asking questions, and very much appreciate it. Thank you very much.